So just to introduce this pilot maintenance training, we're talking today about check ones. This training is recurrency training or refresher training. This isn't initial training. You should have already been trained in how to do a check one. This video is just so that you can come back to it afterwards and have a watch, okay, and be reminded. Before you start your check one, obviously maintenance control will have asked you to do it. They will have provided you with the worksheets and relevant technical data to do the job. Just make sure that you have access to the system of maintenance, the maintenance manuals, the illustrated parts catalogue. You've got all the information you need at hand before you start on this check one. On a practical note, we're going to look at the worksheet, and the worksheet's what you need to sign off, and it has all the jobs that need to be done in order to certify a check one. But it doesn't really tell you the order at which you should do them. And I've just written an order that I'm going to read through, and you can see it on screen. So 1, run engine, warm up oil. You could do this if you came back from a flight. If you'd already flown in the morning and you're going to do the check one in the afternoon, the engine would already be warm. Remove engine cowlings. Drain engine oil into a container through a screen. We just want to make sure there's anything in the oil that we're going to look at it and catch it in a screen. You're going to then remove the oil filter and put that into the same oil screen and drain into the same bucket, and just make sure there's nothing comes out of the oil filter. Then I would just leave that oil draining and the filter draining and move around to the suction screen. So remove the suction screen, inspect it, clean it, and then put it back in with a new crush washer. Close the quick drain. The last thing you want to do is, as you place new oil in your engine, watch it drain out the bottom because you haven't closed the quick drain. So close the quick drain. We're going to go to the cutting open the filter and inspecting. This will be shown on the video, but go to a nice clean workbench and cut open your filter and inspect it. Now we can install a new filter and torque with a torque wrench, refill the engine with oil, inspect the induction air filter. They should last a long time, but if you've been going through very dusty or very grassy airstrips, you may need to brush off the dirt and debris. And if it's really, really dirty, you can replace the induction filter. But most often you can just brush off the loose dirt. Inspect the fuel pump. Mainly you're looking to make sure that the fuel pump diaphragm hasn't split and fuel's not coming out through the drain. But this is something you'd have to do almost every day anyway, so it's nothing new, but inspect the fuel pump. We'll then look at the propeller. It says wash the engine and lubricate the controls if required. If the engine isn't particularly dirty, you can wipe off any excess dirt with a rag. If it's really dirty, then you could wash it. Install engine cowlings. Inspect the undercarriage and the landing gear, check your tyre pressures and things. Go out for an engine run. Get the engine back up to operating temperature so that we can make sure there's no leaks. Then remove the side cowlings, and just by looking through the side cowlings, you should be able to see if there's any drops of oil on your bottom cowlings, and just particularly inspect the areas that you've disturbed, such as the suction screen and the remote filter. So look at the areas which you've had apart. When it comes to drain the oil, most of the aircraft are equipped with a quick drain that you turn on, and then we put a bucket under the engine to catch the oil with a screen so that we can see if there's any particles in the oil. Here comes the job of removing the oil filter. So we're going to have to cut off the locking wire and then unspin the filter. Now this may be quite tight, depending on how long the filter has been on the engine. So if it's very tight, you may need to support this structure as you try and undo the filter. Alright, we're now going to look at cutting open the oil filter. If you give the filter a bit of time to drain, it won't be quite so oily. So we need a filter cutter in order to cut open the filter. We're going to need a knife to cut open the element, and a pair of pliers. Once we've got the filter out of the case, we will need a magnet to inspect the elements for metal. So it's handy to have a vise. It's not necessary, but it's handy. So if we put the filter in the vise, and then our cutter has a little knife blade on here. But as we put it on the filter and turn it around, it slowly cuts a groove and eventually will cut the top off the filter. It will come off. There we go. Alright, so now even though this has been draining for a while, it's still quite oily. So what I normally do is just let it sit on the side of the filter like that, and then the remaining oil can drain out of it. Obviously you can't inspect very much if it's like this. So there's a metal band inside there. That needs to be cut with a pair of pliers. The next stage is to cut around through all the paper elements with a knife. And this is a little bit time consuming, but you're just going to have to carefully go round, cutting through the element. So now that we've cut all around the filter on both sides, it should come away from the case, like so. So once we have the filter on the workbench, we obviously make sure it's clean because we don't want to contaminate it. You can now open up the pleats of the filter and look into them, right? And just see whether there's any debris or any damage. And once you've gone through by just visually inspecting, then you can also take the magnet and just run it through the pleats of the filter. Now if there's any metal or debris, it will be picked up by the magnet. It's very unlikely you're going to see something, and if you pick stuff on the magnet, it will be pretty obvious. So you've inspected the filter, you've found it clean, just like this one, then your inspection is done. This can be disposed of in the dustbin. If you find metal, if you find lots of particles of matter in the filter, that's when it's time to talk to engineering and get some advice. So when it comes to reinstall the filter, just make sure you follow the instructions. This filter tells you to put it on dry with no lubrication on the seal. Other filters ask you to put on engine oil. So just make sure you clearly follow the instructions. Also, this tells us how much torque we need to apply when we reinstall the filter. What I have here is a special torque wrench which is just designed for installing filters, and it will brake at the right torque at 16 to 18 foot-pounds for this type of filter. Once the filter is back on and torqued, now we're going to safety it with locking wire. So we'll twist up the wire and reinstall it, and that should be finished. Remove the oil screen. Okay, I'm just going to cut the wire off the sump plug, and then it can be removed. Just note where the wire goes so that you know how to put it back on. Just be ready with the rag, because once you pull out the screen, it's going to have oil on it. So we're now going to pull out the screen. This is the oil screen, which we're going to clean, inspect, and put back in again. So the oil screen should be free of debris and particles. So you're checking for pieces of metal and things that have gone through the screen, and you're just examining it for that. Once the screen is cleaned, it can be put back in again. So now we have our new crush washer. It has a smooth side, has a side with a groove on it, where the crush side is. This side is going to go to the engine. Once that's installed onto the plug, we're then going to install that onto the screen, and the screen is going to be fitted back into the engine. Now it's time to crush the washer, and you have to crush the washer 135 degrees. So if we start off at the top, then we go here, that's 90, and down here that's 45. That's going to be 135. So we take the first crush
that's 90, and the second is 45, 135. That's how tight we need to tighten the plug. So we're finally finishing the locking wire, and that part of the job is done. Obviously be cautious when handling the propeller. Make sure the keys are out of the ignition. Don't turn the propeller when your body is in the arc of the prop. So we're going to look for things like oil leaks coming from the hub. We're going to look for nicks or damage on the blade of the propeller, and just make sure there's no obvious looseness or movement in the propeller. These are things that you would probably do on a daily anyway, but that's just part of the inspection, just to have a good look at the propeller. Let's look at the MR now. I'm showing you an example of an MR from East Timor, which has already been filled out, but just for the purpose of this example. Here we have our Check One inspection, carried out on job number, so we reference the job number the maintenance control will give you, and transferred to part 2, item 9. Date, signature. Item 9, Check One due, date, signature, license number. Item 9, Check One inspection carried out in accordance with system of maintenance. The hours are very important. The job number, and again the date, license number and signature. This is the certification of the Check One, and the part 2 of the MR incorporates part of the logbook of the aircraft. As we come to the end of this refresher training video on doing a Check One inspection, just to say, if you have any issues, any questions, talk to your maintenance controller or reach out to your aircraft maintenance organisation. We're more than willing to help and answer your questions. So, thanks again for watching, and stay safe.